Hello, everyone. This is Waldorf.
This is Statler.
Yes. Are you here?
I am here.
What are we talking about today?
We're same thing we've been talking about the last couple of months. We're talking about the ninth age.
The ninth age. This time, we're going to talk about smaller games, as you can see.
Yeah, basically, how does one overcome the cost of entry for the ninth age?
Right. This will also prove a good way to get additional people into this game.
Right. I mean, you'd be reading on the boards that they're talking about doing maybe at some point a mini rule book with different versions of rules and all those things. But
abbreviated rules.
Yeah. So what we've kind of done here is we've put together some slides and we're going to pontificate on some of the ideas that we have for being able to. Yes.
Sorry.
Some of the ideas that we have for reducing the cost of entry, for new players getting into the ninth age, without actually doing a lot to the game.
Yeah, and it also, I think this would be great for, like I said, getting new people into it, because not only are they able to get a small, to paint up 20, 30 guys and get something going, but at least when we've always played these games, we've typically gone with a higher player count.
Right.
Played 4 or 6 players on, basically 2 or 3 on a side. And what that does is, of course, that the new player doesn't have to know all the rules, because he's got partners on his
and we're going to talk about that.
And people can help him, that type of thing. Anyway,
So basically, these are some of the observations that we've had, and we're going to go through them. The challenges we see with newcomers coming into the ninth age and playing games. And this was true also back in the days of Warhammer, and frankly, it's true if you want to play Kings of War. So let's jump into it. So the first thing is there's a lot of limitations for new players wanting to come into the ninth age. First, what you heard us kind of talk about is it really requires a lot of figures. I mean, even
most
ogres require an okay number of figures, which are harder to paint just because of the nature of them. But you get any type of horde army, it's a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And figures aren't cheap, particularly if you go with some of the more expensive companies. So it's not something that a lot of people are just going to jump into just because they're afraid by just the financial hit that they might take for something they might not even like.
Right. Good point. And we have the other problem is choosing the right army. You can look at the game and say, oh, that's great. Maybe, I'd really like to play dwarves. And then you find out that everyone hates you because you're playing a gunline army sitting in a corner and, shooting up people.
Right. Or just that...
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't really what you were looking for on that one?
No hatred there. At least you didn't say infernal dwarves. But a lot of times when you get a new player coming into your game group, the first thing they want to do is they want the army that nobody else has.
Correct.
Or they decide they like the look of a particular army.
Mm-hmm.
But then they play it a couple times, and it just doesn't fit their style. They buy that dwarf army, but they're an attacking...
Right.
They should be playing, cavalry.
Or a fiddly player who likes movement.
Exactly.
Now he's got a dwarf army,
and it just doesn't... And they want to be like super magic. So, and then they turn out... So they've bought all these guys, and now maybe they just give up on the game because they don't want to buy a whole bunch more guys.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. Next thing we have is learning rules. Learning new rules takes time. It doesn't matter, how much you try. It does take time. Even the simplest rules, even say like an Age of Sigmar. Yeah, there's 4 pages, but you got like pages of battle scrolls and things you have to read. If you read Kings of War, the rules are not overly complex, but every rule has this thing. It just becomes a question of practice, etc. So the worst thing you want to do to somebody, and I kind of have always hated this in other game systems, is they'll give you like this mini rule book that has a stripped down version of the rules that actually causes the game to play slightly differently.
Right. Correct. And then they end up playing and it's not quite the same.
Well,
game.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe their friends who already play the full rules don't want to play these simplified rules, or they get them all confused and they get frustrated. So yeah.
Yeah. And then that leads to the next one, and you don't want a different set of rules like you just pointed out, because you learn one thing and then it's all of a sudden different when you get up to play with the next level
Exactly.
of people.
And you start getting things
And-
confused, and
Yeah. It's like, oh, I can do this. Well, no, you can't in this set of rules.
And if you're old farts like us, it takes a while to learn stuff. We never forget, but it takes a little while.
Do you know how many,
Especially if it's a slight.
do you know how many sets of rules we know at
Yes,
this point?
yeah.
Anyway, coming from guys who have gone through the whole gamut of World War II, World War II rules.
Yes.
Learning multiple sets of rules, it's hard, and it's hard to keep them apart, to keep them,
Exactly.
from bleeding into each other.
So basically, we actually have a battle report that we should have posted by the time this thing goes up, which we've done a small game, and so we've come up with what we think are some quick solutions and quick wins of a way that you can play Ninth Age and get maybe some friends that have thinking about it but they're intimidated to play and still have some fun. It may not be super competitive tournament type of play,
Right.
but you can have fun.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be that.
Yeah, exactly.
As a matter of fact, but that's a good change of pace
Yes.
for especially the tournament players.
And that's it. And it's good to help people get into the game. And we think it's kind of a good way to get new players, and makes it easier for stores kind of to local hobby shop to think about maybe I'll support this.
Right, especially if they see new players.
It's like I don't have to stock a few things initially until I have a a core group of people.
Good following. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings the game. The game requires minifigures, which we just kind of talked about, and we've kind of gone through this, haven't we?
To a certain degree. So this first thing, I'll just run through this slide. So collecting figures, as I said before, it's very expensive. If you go to GW, you can be paying $5 to $10 just for a single infantryman. All of a sudden you have an army that needs 100 or 200. This is a lot of money that particularly somebody that's maybe in college doesn't have a lot of cash, or somebody who's trying to make ends meet. They want to play the game, but it's a lot of money, and to expect somebody to throw that kind of money at a game, which they're not even sure they like it or not, is something else. The next thing is really many of us, as we get into this game, end up with multiple armies. So
Really?
if we think about just the amount of money we've put into it, so even if you try to say, oh, well, I'm going to go buy painted armies, well, that's even more expensive.
Yeah. Now you're talking.
Right, now you have to have some major cash on your
$12,
hands.
$15 for a mount for a foot guy.
Exactly. So it's, and if you had a family, it's kind of hard to tell your wife that your son can't go to college because you have to buy a painted army. So,
and like it says, painting armies takes a long time, and it's intimidating. I mean, you see these guys that have, if you come into our group, you take a look at some of the armies that are there, and you're like, oh, I'll never be able to paint. I can't paint that. Why would I even try?
Exactly.
But again, that's kind of the
and then when you start painting, you're painting your first few guys, and you're thinking, this isn't one of my first 5 guys, and it's taken me a week.
Yes.
And I've got another 95 to paint.
Yes. But the one thing you kind of like, the bottom point is, at least we can be fairly hard line about this one, is unpainted armies.
Right.
It's it should not be encouraged, at least in our minds. We hate seeing it out there. Somebody comes by and sees you playing a game. If it looks great, it's going to attract attention.
Absolutely.
If they walk by and seeing you playing on a painted blue board with a couple pieces of cardboard thrown around or some felt,
a couple aluminum cans, and
aluminum can
some
for a
neon
tower,
green felt,
yes, and some
a brick.
Yeah, and some primed gray figures.
Yes.
They're going to walk right past it. It's not going to attract attention. Because
Exactly.
I can tell you, last night at the game store, we were playing, and I was up. We actually got one of the front tables, and we were playing up there. And 4 people, and this is not a real busy store, 4 different people came by, stood there, watched for a few minutes, waited till I was done with what I was doing, and they asked me, said, what game is this?
Yep.
And it was great. So, I was able to give them the website, the name of the game. The website's the name of the game, which is very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know that, they were kind of passing through people, so I don't know that it's going to do anything or stick, but at least it attracted their attention.
Realistically, and then, as you said before, I mean, we've been gaming for decades.
Yes.
And we've both run events, we've both run games, campaigns, etc.
Yep.
And we've brought, respectively, a decent number of people into the hobby over that period of time. And what's brought the people into the hobby is the first thing is the aesthetic. That's what always attracts people.
Because they're not even going to look. They're going to walk right past it.
Right. And, you know, to us, and I say we're painting snobs, we'll freely admit it. You'll pick up on that every so often.
My painting is not good, and I'm a painting snob.
You know, it doesn't have to be good painting.
Right.
It just have something. There's just, frankly, play a board game. You know, if you don't want that's our position.
Yes.
Other people disagree with that.
Correct.
But it always just bothers us when we walk and we see people that they just have the big gray armies. And part of what incentivizes that is they need to show up with a 2,500 point army.
Right.
And they're not going to paint that in a couple of days. They're not going to paint that in a couple of months. More than likely, it's going to take them a year to 2 years to get their army painted, and there's going to be changes and things they're going to tweak because they're going to paint things inside after they've played it. It's not the optimal unit. They want something else, you know, until they get a critical mass. And that can, for all the other reasons we've listed, that what ends up happening is once I start running, I talk to people that, you know, they always show up with these multiple unpainted armies.
Right.
And it's like it's kind of like committing a crime. The first time is really hard. But once you've done it, you start getting used to being a criminal.
You
know?
do.
So
that's a good point.
You know, and you just see these people. Oh, and I don't know how many people over the years you talk to. Oh, I just finished this army, and the only thing they've done is glued all the figures. They've actually glued the figures together.
Put them on bases.
And put them on bases, and that was finished. And now they're working on their new army, and it's like, okay. And they're having fun, and I don't want to besmirch, you know, other people enjoying themselves.
Right.
But for me, when I play a game, I'm not interested in playing against somebody that has
a gray army,
a silver army, or a black army, or a white army, whatever. And that's just where I'm coming from. And I think that you want to ensure that the Ninth Age doesn't, you know, reinforce that, because I think Warhammer did, especially with 8th edition, just because it was too hard to get into, because you had to have a critical mass of figures, and if you wanted to play right away, that meant you were going to play with unpainted stuff, or you were going to wait.
Yeah, that's
and
the big
a lot of
thing.
people don't want to wait.
No, they want to jump in and play or whatever. And you know, I will own up to the name of the painting snob thing, but I will play somebody who has an unpainted army who's new. I will, if they show up with that same army next week and there's a couple more figures painted, I can see effort being done, then I will continue to play that person. If I see the guy shows up with one unit painted and then 2 months later he's showing up with the exact same thing, then it's like a guy, then I'm sorry, he's not putting, anyway, I don't know.
But yeah,
kind of painting myself into a corner on this one,
but I think the point is it's a lot of figures.
It is. It's a lot of work.
As most people think of Ninth Age, which is talking about 2,000, 2,500 points.
Yeah, you're talking, 100 figures easily.
And some armies can be 200. So
right, but again, it's a lot of stuff. Anyway, and go ahead.
So the next one is learning rules takes time, as we mentioned the thing. But the reality is that the Ninth Age rules are not really overly complex. They've gone through a lot of effort to explain things. Yeah, they have a decent number of pages. But if you look at any set of war game rules on the market, you're hard pressed to find anything that's less than 36 pages of rules.
Correct.
There are a few exceptions. I said, we can jump to Age of Sigmar, but that's really a misconception because you have to look at the battle scrolls.
Because the battle scrolls contain a ton of the rules.
That has all of the flavor to the game. So even there, and there's hundreds of battle scrolls. So but the reality is Ninth Age fits pretty well. The mechanics are all D6 based. They're all relatively comparative. No particular requirement. Rule has a lot of modifiers. So as rules go, and as guys that have played all kinds of rules for historical periods and fantasy and sci-fi, they're not overly complex. I'm not saying that they're simplest rules. They're not checkers.
They're not checkers.
But with time, it's definitely something you can learn.
Yeah, nuances, again, they're different. But Yeah, and separate simplified rules are not the answer. Like we talked about, not always the answer. Like we talked about before, you don't want a separate set of rules.
Right. I mean, it might work if you've got two guys that have never heard of it, and on some lark they just want to go try something themselves.
Correct.
But
And then you can kind of step them through it or whatever. And
right. But if it's somebody who's going to join a game group or already is interested because they've seen it in a local game store, and they're going to have other people that kind of know the game that can help them. And what and complexity really in Ninth Age comes with the large numbers of combinations that you have to manage.
right.
You've got high level characters, so you've got lots of magic items that are buffing one another. You've got magic heavy games where you've got a lot of spells that you're in and bound items, and you're managing that and how you modify the dice rolls and you're managing the overlapping synergies and complexity of buff wagons and all these things.
Right.
These things stacking on top of that's what makes the game complex.
Complex.
And to a tournament player, that's what makes it fun.
Yes.
But we're not talking about tournament players.
No, I mean, the basics, like you said, the basics are my weapon skill's better than you, so I hit you on a 3.
Exactly.
You know.
Or my ballistic skill's this. I hit
My
you
ballistic-
on that.
yeah, 7 minus your ballistic
It
skill,
takes
that's what you're hitting.
this to roll a spell.
Yeah.
I've got this spell to roll. So
I compare my strength to your toughness and adjust up and down.
Exactly.
It's these are very simple very simple concepts. But then, like you just said, the buffs started. You start doing buffs, adding into that, and
right.
spells and everything else changes.
Right. And frankly, what causes you to have to do all these things I shouldn't have to do these, but why when these things really start coming up is when the points get up there. You can afford all the best stuff. You can afford all the buffs, the big magic users, the super characters, all the synergies. So
Okay. So choosing the right army. Like we said before, when you start out playing, you don't necessarily know what army you're going to want. You can watch a few games, you can see how armies play, you can even play along with, we've a lot of times had games where just somebody new can play along with your army. But, after you've played for a little bit, you kind of, like you said earlier, you kind of figure out that, this really doesn't fit me.
yeah, it's not my play style,
Right.
which is the second point. It's like, okay, I got Sylvan Elves, and I don't like running all over the place, and I don't like not standing and grinding it out with somebody or
Right.
the
I don't like being the fiddly guy that has to run away all
Exactly.
the time and,
Yeah.
snipe at people.
and the combo charges and all of that
Right.
stuff. Or I don't like I don't want to be dwarves because I want to maneuver. I've got Kingdom of Equitaine. I want a grinding army.
Right.
So these are things that you don't find out until you've played a bit.
And like it says, the first often you have is often chosen for some other reason. You found a bunch of starter models. Somebody's selling off a part of an army, so you pick that up. You just kind of like the looks of them. There's a lot of little reasons that'll make you pick your first army,
Yep.
and that's not necessarily the army you're going to end up with,
Exactly.
or the army you're happy and comfortable
Or happy
with.
with, yes. So back to learning multiple rule sets is hard. The learning rule sets, are hard for first timers. And if you've never played a war game before, it can be somewhat intimidating. But if you played a war game before, when you have similar concepts, it's usually not so bad.
Correct.
Particularly if you're somebody who plays 40K, it shouldn't be a difficult move for you to move into the Ninth Age.
Right.
Yeah.
You just got to learn the formations
Right.
a bit, and
Right. But if
But the
it's-
basic mechanic that's there is the same.
Exactly, but historically, fantasy and science fiction games have been the entry types of games. That's just younger players tend to jump to that before they'll jump into historicals.
Historicals, correct.
Historicals tend to be something that older people play or people move into, or people who have a passion for a particular point of history.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Ninth Age falls into that that first camp is it's aesthetically so pleasing, and it's shiny, something that a new player would be interested in. Is maybe their first game. They watched Lord of the Rings on at the theater, and now they wanna push their own elves or humans or orcs.
Yeah.
The other thing is really I found that most players, as mentioned before, they learn through others. There aren't a lot of people who buy a set of rules
Correct.
and just learn how to play it and then magically find players. You know, occasionally you might have a buddy or a couple buddies that want to try something out,
Right.
and you might learn that way. But more common, at least in my experience, is you already have friends that are into it that bring you
Right.
into the game. There's a club that you join that calls you to get into the game, or you're interested in joining because you go to a convention and you see it and it excites you. And then very commonly, you just walk into a local gaming store, and they've got the game set up, and there's some people playing, and you have a chat, or the game store manager is doing demos, or
Right.
doing stuff with the game. You know,
Yeah, I mean, even our group, in the group we've played in for years, it's a lot of times it'll be one guy who picks up a set of rules and reads them, learns how to play it, and introduces it to the other guys.
Yep.
And
You
then
got people that have
everyone,
never read the rules. You know?
and along with that, you got the guys who've never read the rules and keep asking you, well, are you sure that goes that way? You're like, yeah, well, have you read it? Anyway, but anyway, we have those.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. You learn through others, probably the most common way.
Exactly. And then changing rule sets, all the time can be. There are people that like change. There's people that like, continuity. I can think back to every time, that GW would change their rules. The great moaning and groaning. And then once the internet took off, it became, craziness. Every time rules changes, and everything was a disaster.
Correct.
And it can be somewhat frustrating because how many of us we knew how to play rules, now we have a new version, and we keep playing certain things in the old version in the new version because we forgot about the change.
Right. We don't notice. We
Right,
forgot that
right.
it has changed.
Or we've built our army, we've optimized it maybe to the old version, and now the new version it's not optimized anymore.
I'm still taking break tests at a -1 when I lost just by the musician.
Yes.
By the way.
Oh,
I do that,
okay.
I do that often.
That's a great example. Or
Yeah.
I forgot how the shooting worked in our last multiplayer game as far as bolt throwers.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh, he has to hit the end guy, So so there's just things you do, So that can be frustrating, and you can't be changing rules all the time. And then having a different rule set from the majority, it can make it hard to find opponents. So
Right.
say I want to play these rules, but everyone else is playing and everything else. What are you going to play? You're going to play what everybody else is playing.
Right.
You got some new guy, he wants to play in your game. Do you really want to go to some simplified rule game and play that with him? Probably not. Let's be honest. You're going to try to get him into it's not that hard. Join
Right.
us
Come
in the
on
main
in.
rules.
Yeah, we'll help you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to have a system that supports that dynamic.
Definitely. Quick wins. The Ninth Age rules are sound, not really that complicated, and they're not. Like we talked about before, it's a simple D6 mechanic. It's a hit, wound, armor.
Exactly, and they're evolving. They're going to evolve over time. There's a few little oddities in them, but all rules have those. Let's be honest. So they're not that hard to so they're a good foundation. And that really brings us to just let the players start with the full rules. They don't need to have simplified rules or missing sections or whatever. If they don't want to put have any magic in their army, they don't have to have any magic in their army.
Right.
All they have to learn is how to roll 2 dice to dispel. So if they don't want to have shooting in their army, they don't have to have shooting in their army. So the rules give you options, but that doesn't mean you have to use everything that's there.
Right. And that kind of ties into the next point: encourage multiplayer games. Because that also lets you team up a new guy with an experienced guy.
Right.
And a guy that doesn't really feel like doing any magic at all. He can, maybe his partner does. And, if they work out their armies together at least, we typically don't.
Yes.
We typically walk up and just, hey, what do we got? But, that's a possibility.
But that's really also how, and we've been playing a long time, and we've played all kinds of different games, and we've had groups of varying sizes into those different games. And the reality is that for us, we find most people, while they might pick up the rules, they really learn by playing with other people. And multiplayer games are the best way to do that. You can, you're going to have this small force on the flank, or this is what you need to do, whatever. And that, they can ask the questions there. They can feel more confident because they
Well, they've got a guy on their
they've got a guy
side that
on
they
their
can
side
turn
helping
to
them.
and say, "Hey,
Exactly.
what do you think about this?" It's
Exactly, and it also gives, and we have had great times over the years. After the game's done, we go to dinner, and everyone talks about the game.
Yes,
so
exactly.
the
what were you thinking?
exactly.
But no, and it also, the multiplayer games is also good for, in my opinion at least, good for new players, because he's not meeting one guy and talking to him over a game. He's in the group now. There's 2 or 3 other guys there at that
Exactly.
table with him, and he's being brought into. He's not just meeting one of you. He's being brought into your group. And again, Ninth Age, it's not sold on a shelf.
Exactly.
It's only going to grow if we're bringing people into this game.
Absolutely.
So encouraging guys to come in and play, if we're going to start playing these multiplayer little warband type games, I can see us easily bringing a second army. Just build a whatever point force in a second thing,
Exactly.
and bring it with you because it's small. Bring it with you. Somebody
Yep.
walks up, says, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Join in. Why not?"
Or even organize from your existing army, just
Yeah.
a little force. It's not too hard. And how hard is it? So if you allow low, figure count games, and we're not saying this is the replacement for Ninth Age. All
No,
we're
not
saying
at all.
is this is a way to get new players to play them, and it also give you something different to do as a club. But hey, I can go buy a box set of some kind of warriors and one hero,
Right.
and I could, in theory, have an army that I could play with.
Yes. Yeah, as you'll see with the battle report we did.
Yes.
Some guy took that a little too literally.
Yeah.
So suggestions. Like we said before, use the full set of the rules. Don't dumb them down. Use what's there.
Exactly. That'll ensure that new players support it, and it's not just about existing players support it, and then new players can merge very easily. Other one is change the army composition for warbands. Right now, the way they're structured at 1,000 points, you really can't build really small armies.
Right.
You can build you can't even build a legal army at a small point level because the units, except for the cheapest units, they're just too expensive to field the things. And sorry. Go ahead.
Start with, like I said, start with small point games, 300 to 500 point games. Those are nice size games. You get a couple little units in there,
And a dude.
You get a character. You can move. They move. The games move along fairly quickly. They're nice. And along with that, since you don't have a lot of points on the board, you're going to need more objectives.
Right. You don't want the mini battle star. And the way you do that and make it a much more free flowing game is just have more objective based scenarios. More things to do, so it's not just run up and fight each other. So keep their army spread out a little bit.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to do the run up and fight each other, don't even.
Yeah.
Just push your units together and be done with it. So suggestions for army composition. If you're doing those 300, 500 point games, no Lord characters.
No.
Because a Lord character in a game that size is just going to dominate everything.
Yes. A one-up rerollable 4 ward save with a +6 multiple tags is going to be a bit much in that type of.
And that's going to be no
scenario.
fun.
Exactly. So
I would
basically,
say for all involved, but some people actually like.
some people don't care. So
Yes,
yeah.
some people actually enjoy having that character that just walks up and.
Or just having no
I'm
chance of
invulnerable.
losing. So
Exactly.
everyone has their own thing. But so hero level characters are really is how you need to go. So you make basic army. So every army has to have a general and it has to have a core unit, not 2 core units or 3 or 4,
Right.
just 1 core unit.
Mhm.
And that can be, that could be your army if you want it to be. It may not be optimal, but that's what it could be.
Yeah.
The army.
No army can have more special units or characters than it has core units. Simple.
So so that way special or somewhat special. They're somewhat locked in. You can only have. They're not going to be overwhelming, but they're still there.
Yeah.
Then you have no army can have more rare unit. It can only have 1 rare unit for every 2 core units. That makes rare units much more difficult. With 300 to 500 points, you're not going to have a lot of points to be having a lot of units anyway.
Right,
So
correct.
chances are, unless it's an eagle, something like that, you're not going to have multiple rares anyway. But at least it keeps the rares down, but it doesn't eliminate them completely.
Yeah. And bring the minimum and maximum unit size to half. This way you don't have that unit of 60 night goblins in
Exactly.
in a game like this, you know.
Exactly.
But, you know, and bring them down to half so that they are manageable, you know.
And you can have a number of units in a small point game, and you'll see if you look at our little battle that we did, you know, most of us had 2 or 3 units, and they were very small because we could do that with half points, you know. And that means even the more elite guys in core, you can still afford a unit without having to buy 10 of them or 20 of them, you know. So, and then as Waldorf said, the max sizes are important too, because you really don't want somebody showing up with a huge block of 60 guys
that no one can touch.
Because at this type of level, you just can't fight that. You can't kill enough guys fast enough.
Right.
Except in some extreme scenarios, I guess.
Suggestions for the game. Bring it down to a 4x4 table.
Yeah, if you're going to have only 300 to 500 points on each side, one-on-one, you need a smaller table, or stuff's going to be too spread. You could probably even go down to 3x3.
Yeah.
But you need to have a smaller playing surface to make things maneuver.
Yeah, or you're just going to get wandering around the board looking for each other.
Exactly. But if you're playing the multiplayer games like we talked about, you know, you got 2 players on a side or 3 players on a side, and then you can have a full-size table.
Correct.
Then it works just fine.
Yeah, because you end up going to, like you said, we played a 3-on-3 player game,
Which is 1,200 points.
which was 1,200 points, but there was as many units as there is in a lot of 2,500 point games.
Right.
I mean, they were smaller, but there's more of them, so they did stretch out to cover a good portion of that board.
And it really did make paying attention to your flanks even more difficult.
Correct. And like it says, have some at least 4 objectives on the board just to keep people moving.
Right. Otherwise, it is line up. And there's the scenarios that exist today. You have 1 or you have 1 or 3, right?
1 or 2.
1 or 2.
Yeah,
1 or 2.
1 or 2.
So you want to have a few more than that and have them spread out, and that kind of
Keeps you moving.
That keeps them moving. Maybe it keeps. In our game, we did an offensive objective, a defensive objective, and there's 2 on the flanks. So it adds a little tactical thought process to the game. It's not just pushing guys around.
Also, when we're playing these, we tend to put more terrain on the table.
Yes.
Just because they're smaller units, they can get around it easier.
Exactly.
It's not as effective.
And even things like buildings, which are a pain in the tuchus in a standard point game.
Right.
In a small point game, it's no big deal. Oh, these got 10 guys in there. You don't care. Well, I mean, you don't care from a aesthetic or anything like that. It's not like 60 guys in this little tiny little building. So
yeah. And again, 300 to 500 point armies.
Keep it small.
Seems to be really good
Right.
size.
And
for
you can
these.
probably have an army of anywhere from, depending on the army, 6 to 30 figures.
Right. So that's it. The other thing you can do with the 3 to 500 point armies, one of the other things that it kind of can encourage is an escalation thing.
Yep.
I mean, you do 3 to 500 point. You start with 400 point armies. The next month you move up to 500 points.
Right.
And just kind of slowly creep up, and that kind of helps and encourages people to build their armies.
Exactly, and it gives them time to paint stuff.
Yeah.
So you can they're incentivized to build with and paint. With your tournament.
So give it a try.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, take a look at our battle report on our group game we did with each one of us had a 400 point force, and as I said, it was
roughly,
yeah.
Some of us had a little more.
Yeah. The 400 point force, but we had fun with it. We didn't change any of the rules. All we did is what we saw here. We changed the army composition rules. We had some objectives on the table, and maybe, argumentatively, we may have had a little more terrain, maybe not. I mean, it depends on the player.
Yeah, we didn't have a ton.
We didn't have a ton. But it was really nothing more than that. And just by having those smaller armies, each one of us didn't have a general in the battle standard bearer to rely on.
I don't think anyone had a battle.
No one had a
standard.
BSB,
Right.
so that reroll thing was gone. We didn't have only one side had magic.
That's true.
You
Yes.
know, and it wasn't overpowering super high level magic. It was scary for the defensive side, but you could only afford realistically only so many characters. So and we all kind of went into it with one player did have two.
One player had two characters. Everyone else had one.
Everyone else had one. You know,
Right.
and you'll see that people went with different types of armies. There was a little like cav army. There was just one block of undead guys. There was a shooting versus block, which was a little overpointed, but so there was just different approaches, and it was fun. It was something to do, you know, when you didn't want to take the game too seriously in the set, and it was and we think it would be a good way for people that want to get more people in the Ninth Age, you know, to bring in new folks.
Yeah. You know, that might be a good thing. We could actually start doing this the first weekend. We typically play on Wednesday. We have a Wednesday night group that meets.
Right.
Maybe
For the Ninth Age.
For the Ninth Age.
Yeah. We have other nights for other games. Yeah.
Ridiculous. Anyway, yes. So maybe we should, you know, we haven't really talked about it outside of here, but maybe we start doing like the first Wednesday of the month we do Warbands.
Yeah, we can
and just kind of encourage people, and that way gets people in quickly.
Right.
So anyway, but the same thing. Like I said, they're fun games. I had a blast in the 6-player game we played. I've always had fun playing the multiplayer games.
Because you don't know what you
no
talked to
matter
your
what
buddy on your flank, and all of a sudden he didn't do what he said he was going to do, and
don't
you're
worry.
left high and dry.
Like, what do you plan on doing? I'm doing this. And I'm like, okay, good. You're going to be covering my flank. Great. So I'll go ahead and move. And then all of a sudden he just takes a right turn and moves on out there. And you're like,
Exactly.
what are you doing to me? Which adds to a lot of the fun. Anyway. But yeah, this was it's a great way to push the hobby. It's a great way to get newer people into the game. At least I think so.
And I do too.
Yeah.
Of course we think it because we're making the video.
Yeah, and we're making the video. So, you know, if we both think this, then it must be right.
Absolutely, because we're old and opinionated. So
We're old and can't be wrong.
Exactly.
So, yeah, give it a try. If you do give it a try, let us know.
Exactly.
Post a message, let me know how it goes. I would be interested in hearing from other people.
Right. As I said, we're not saying this is a replacement for Ninth Age. It's not. It's an enhancement to get other people into the game. It's a change of pace occasionally. It's not going to be the super competitive game.
Correct.
But it is going to be competitive to a degree.
Oh, it's going to get competitive.
Because it's a game. It's going to get to. And you can have fun and you can try out basic mechanics easily.
All right. That's going to be it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for listening.
Till the next time.